Hello, I'm David Feller with DVDO. This video goes through the detailed setup and uses of the DVDO iscan Duo, the premier video processor for home theater, home entertainment center, and many professional applications as well. If you're a person who already labels themselves as a videophile, the menu system on the Duo will already seem intuitive, and every conceivable video adjustment is available at your fingertips. Go ahead and jump in. You'll find the Duo one of the most exciting pieces of video technology available on the market. If, however, you're an end user trying to understand the value of the DVDO Duo that your CD installer spec'd for your system, or perhaps a dealer wanting to understand how Duo can improve the quality of video and give you the maximum flexibility of adjustment and control for every input and every output and installation, this video is for you. Let's start with a high-level overview of what Duo is and why it's put in so many entertainment systems. At its core, Duo provides four major functions in one good-looking box. AV switching, with 15 video inputs including HDMI, component, composite, S-video, and even VGA, and a variety of assignable audio inputs. You have all the flexibility to connect anything to your HD TV. It has video controls, zoom, format control, input adjustment, so whatever you connect all looks as good as possible, is centered on screen, and is that way every time you turn it on. The goal is to get everything to look like the format of Blu-ray material. It has video processing, the best deinterlacing, scaling, and video enhancement on the market. Why? Because while Blu-ray may be as good as it gets, you probably watch less than 10% of Blu-ray content. Most of the time you're watching cable, satellite, DVDs, or even older content, nearly all of which is both interlaced and less resolution than 1080p. The bottom line is, your TV is like a big pegboard, with every hole being a pixel that needs to be filled with data. A Blu-ray player can perfectly fill every hole, but almost everything else out there has to be scaled and processed to fill each hole. Even cable and satellite boxes, giving you HD, almost never provide true 1080p content. The native resolution is at best 1080i, and between the cable box and the TV, those two devices spend less on video processing than you spent for lunch yesterday. Duo is a very high-powered device that not only can give you the best picture from any source, but it can actually back out all the bad video processing before it starts over with its own internal engine. Absolutely amazing. And finally, Duo is at the heart of fast and simple color calibration. You're probably saying, I just bought a brand new LED TV and it's all digital, so it's already as good as it can get, right? Not even close. Default modes on TVs are made to grab your attention and get you to buy the TV in the store. Most are excessively hot, overly bright, and the colors are exaggerated. Nothing like what the film directors intended for their content. You absolutely have to calibrate a new system, and with Duo and our partner SpectraCal, that process is simple, low cost, and very fast. Now, C.H. Chi, one of the original founders of DVDO, and the current general manager will walk you through the detailed setup screens to get an idea of all that Duo can do for you. You're more than welcome to watch the entire training video, or if you're after something specific, a table of contents that lists topics by video timecode is right there below in the notes. Now here's Chi from the CEDIA 2012 show floor.
Hi, I'm CH Chi. I'm with DVDO. I'm here to talk about iscan Duo and its features. So the iscan Duo is a very versatile video processor that allows you to control many inputs and has the best of class performance as well. It's very useful for calibration and really for the videophile who cares about controlling the video experience on the large screen. So let's go ahead. So the iscan Duo has 15 inputs, 8 HDMI inputs, 2 component inputs, video, VGA, S-video. Just quickly run through this. 3 composite videos, and it comes up in auto mode. Auto mode just allows the iscan Duo to detect which of the inputs are active and switch to it based on the priority. And the priority of the iscan Duo can be set by going to the configuration menu over here, and on input priority. As you can see here, HDMI 1 is the highest priority, and you can essentially go down to the lowest priority, which is basically video 1, 2, and 3. And you can adjust the priority very simply by going, let's say, to HDMI 1, moving to this HDMI 1 priority, and just moving the priority down. So now you've made the HDMI 1 like the 6th priority. So that's how you set your priority for auto input selection. So moving back up to the menu. Now the iscan Duo has two HDMI video outputs, and in this menu you're able to select one HDMI video output and of course the second HDMI video output. So now these two outputs can also be enabled simultaneously. So you can set that up in the output setup menu, where you go to the second output menu and you can turn the second output mode on, where essentially we will authenticate with the syncs, and then when you get a picture back, here in this case it will default back to off because the iscan Duo is only connected to one display. So let's just scroll down the menu to make it easy to understand. So the other feature about the iscan Duo is that it allows you to control the aspect ratio of your input. Now in HDMI, there's a lot of features that it comes in an automatic feature to detect what the default aspect ratio is. So therefore, the iscan Duo just defaults to an auto. But there are many cases where you do not want to have the auto input aspect ratio selection, and you want to do it manually. So you can turn it off, and now you can see all the menus are active. They are no longer grayed out. And first we go to the picture aspect ratio, and this allows you to essentially 16:9 is the aspect ratio for high definition content. You could have an aspect ratio for a standard def content, in which case the iscan Duo will stretch the content, or maybe even for PC formats, where it will essentially it's a 5:4 aspect ratio. So let's go back to the most common use, which is 16:9. Now, once you have a 16:9 aspect ratio, in this case the tennis match is 16:9, since it's broadcast with a content at 16:9. You could sometimes have content that's actually wider than the active aspect ratio is wider, like a 2.35 to 1 movie. So in this case you can select 2.35, where what happens is you can see that we can put borders around the aspect ratio, around the content itself. And when you do that, you can actually control the brightness of these black bars. So black bar borders here, and you can effectively go to the output setup, and as you can see, we have many controls. Jump to border level and essentially change our border level from, say, gray. So some people do not like black, they like gray. Can adjust your border level. So just put it back to 0. And moving back up to input aspect ratio control. Under input aspect ratio control, we have something called stretch, where you can effectively stretch the image. And when you stretch the image will be stretched horizontally or vertically. These are independent ways of stretching. So you can stretch the input vertically. You can see that starting to stretch. And you can stretch the input. Let's say I just keep it stretched here. And you can also stretch it horizontally using the menu button, your navigation button, Okay, and now that it's stretched, let's say we leave it at that. Now you can go back to the shift menu, where you cannot actually, once you have stretched it, you can actually shift it to the right, to the left, or to the right, to the top, or to the bottom. So you can now basically manipulate your input image so that it is framed to the setting that you like. And this setting will be saved. Once this is done and you stretch it, you can essentially save your setting in a preset. It's default into a preset setting now, because it's now not the standard setting that you have. So let's just go back to the standard full frame. As you can see, we have I'll stay in preset right now. In the preset, you can see that we have Panorama Mode. We're actually stretching it unevenly, also called Nonlinear Stretch. You can do a 4:3 letterbox, where you can have essentially the content is a letterbox 4:3. You can stretch it vertically. The 4:3 full frame, where you can essentially do what they call pillar box. And the pillar box have borders, which you can also change the level of the borders, just like I showed earlier with the border level. And let's just go back to full frame again. So now you're back. So you can always go back to user preset, which is what we did earlier with vertical stretch and shift, vertical stretch or horizontal stretch and shift or pan, if you will, and it remembers then the user preset. Or just kind of quickly zoom back and see how fluid the motion is, going back to the 16:9 full frame. So moving on. So as you can see, the iscan, as you can see, the iscan Duo is very flexible with all the controls, and we just add the input aspect ratio setting. So in many other products, like an AV receiver, for example, with perhaps comparable processing, it's just not enough control for the video file to set the picture to what he or she wants. Moving on, I'd like to talk about prep. Prep is a unique technology in the iscan Duo that is able to recover the original interlaced signal from a poorly deinterlaced signal. So this applies to let me go back to the menu. 480p, 576p, 1080p 50, 1080p 60 hertz signal. Now we get the original interlaced version of the signal, and then we use our deinterlacer that's superior and create a really good picture. No other technology can do this today. Now, with everything with the Duo, you can always have the flexibility of enabling or disabling our technology, just in case. So there's an auto mode, in which case you just let prep do its own thing, or I can turn prep off. Now I'd like to talk about the deinterlacer. The deinterlacer in the iscan Duo is one of the best in the industry. It is what we call the motion adaptive and source adaptive deinterlacer. The deinterlacer defaults to auto mode, which means it just automatically detects sources of the original source of the video, whether it's originally interlaced or originally filmed, or even edits in between. Now, for some folks who are who really like the best picture quality and they know what the original content is, well, you can basically tell the iscan Duo that the content is filmed. Now, in the in 60 hertz standard countries, like in the United States, film is shot at 24 hertz. So this is called treat to pull down when you convert to 60 hertz. So in this case, you set if you know that your content is filmed in the United States, then you basically choose force 3.2. In European countries where the standard is 50 hertz and the film is originally shot at 25 frames per second, you can basically set it to force 2.2. And we even have force 2.2 even odd for certain cases where certain film where force 2.2 it does not work. So as you can see here, we address all cases for the discerning user. Moving back here, so if the user knows that the content is video, for example, then the user can also tell the iscan Duo that, hey, just be yourself in the interlaced video mode. Now this happens, for example, when scenes are shot in sports events in 1080i, and you don't want you want the iscan Duo to just always treat the signal as an interlaced signal. So, but for most use cases, auto is just great. Now, game mode is what it says. It applies to the current video input that's selected. So in this case, game mode is disabled because you're watching video content and you want the best video quality. But if you're playing a video game, the deinterlacing in the best performance mode or in auto mode will incur some delay, 2, 3, or in some cases 4 frame of video delay. So this is not acceptable to video gamers, so you can enable game mode, and in that case the deinterlacer drops to a delay of just several lines. So going back to enabling game mode, I'll digress here a little bit and saying that a lot of the settings, all the settings here for input adjustments is actually per input. So that's one of the neat things what the iscan Duo is that we are storing our settings later in picture controls, input adjustment, it's all per input. So when you switch input from one to the next, it remembers what your settings are. So in this particular case, I'll just quickly run through the next few menu items, which are all related to things like color space, which comes up in auto mode, but you do all have the option of going to RGB, YCBCR422, or YCBCR444. This is just to address certain cases where your sources are not behaving correctly. Colorimetry is the same thing. We always default to auto, but you can always manually choose the colorimetry. Video level is the same as well. HDMI allows you the source and the sync, in which case the Duo, to automatically select the video level, whether it's for video content or for PC content. But if it's wrong, you can set it correctly. So essentially the iscan Duo is taking account of sources that may not be doing the right thing when it connects to our inputs. In this case, deep color is, you can set it to off, which is actually set in off mode because the source that we're connecting is not in deep color. But you can also manually force it to a 30-bit or 36-bit deep color. Now, if you actually have a Blu-ray player that supports deep color, the iscan Duo will automatically set itself to whatever mode the deep color is in. Chromaticity on the input side is the same thing. It's auto because when we handshake between the source and the input of the iscan Duo, you have all these chromaticities that's default to auto, but you can set all these different levels of chromaticity. Hot plug source is really designed to add more compatibility to with certain sources. In this case, when it's in off mode, when we are actually connected to a source device, we don't send a hot plug signal to the sink, to the source. So a hot plug is just sent to the source. When you send a hot plug signal, the source will basically initiate a re-authentication. So we can either send a hot plug signal or not send a hot plug signal. It just depends on whether the source is capable of doing that. By default, we normally set it to hot plug signal to off. It's just that it works a lot faster. HDCP mode is on and off. This is actually interesting because for some sources that are not sending an HDCP signal, then it would be a good thing to set it to off, because then the source will not send an HDCP signal, and then you will not incur any delay in authentication. So this would depend on your source, of course. Now, by default, HDCP is set to on because almost all the devices today set HDCP to on. But in some cases, when HDCP is turned off, you essentially are bypassing authentication, which means there'll be no authentication from the source to the sink for HDCP because the original content is not content protected. Now, 3D pass-through is auto. The iscan Duo will pass through the 3D signal automatically, but in some cases, because of, again, for flexibility of compatibility, if you don't get a 3D signal, then you can just force 3D to be on automatically. Audio input, in this case, by default, is set to HDMI because we're basically sending HDMI audio on the HDMI cable to your input. But you have the choice of selecting audio from coax, optical 123, or stereo 1.2 into the iscan Duo as well as another channel for routing audio. Audio delay. This one. By default, the iscan Duo will automatically delay the audio to match the video processing delay, so that there's no harm done. The input delay will essentially, when it's output from the iscan Duo, the delays will be matched. Now, in some cases, though, if you want to adjust more delay because there's a mismatch of audio and video from the input, you can now delay your audio to basically correct for any delays that's originally in the source. And the delay granularity, as you can see here, is very fine. It's from it's in 1 millisecond increments. In this case, you can even go negative to basically if you will, delay the video over the audio. So that's the input adjust. Picture controls, I'll just quickly mention. Brightness is a standard control that we have, which is essentially adjusting the input black level. Contrast is adjusting the input white level. Color saturation, as it says, or some people call it just color, is adjusting the saturation of the input. Hue is hue control. YC delay is chroma luma delay. In some sources, the chroma and luma delay is there's a delay between chroma and luma, and you can adjust the delay appropriately so that there's your luminance signal and your chrominance signal are essentially aligned. So on detail enhancement, this is a control that you have, very fine granularity, allows you to adjust the fine details of a picture, to sharpen the picture or to lower the detail in the image because of noise. So if a very noisy picture, just random noise, it's nice to reduce the detail somewhat to remove this random noise. Or if you have a detail, the picture is very clean, but there's just not enough detail. You can push up the detail in very fine, with a very fine control. Edge adjustment is a technology that allows you to only enhance the edge of an image. So where there are essentially very big transitions of a white to a, let's say, color signal, the edge will basically be over here, where you're essentially sharpening the edge. So at any time when there's a high contrast area, you will only be adjusting that area. So this is nice for where, in a case where you have a noisy picture and it's somewhat fuzzy, but you want to make it brighter or sharper without making the background noise higher. So then you just adjust the edge control. We can also minimize the edge when there's a lot of when the edge is too sharp. You can also soften the edge. Mosquito noise reduction. There's three controls here. Basically, for scenes where there's a lot of mosquito noise around the edge, you can have a low or high filter to remove mosquito noise. Hue correction is called chroma. Hue stands for chroma upsampling error correction. Some legacy DVD players and satellite boxes have chroma errors when you upsample from a 420 signal to a 420 in a DVD, if you will, to a 422. They create essentially vertical aliasing, vertical noise, if you will, in the colors, in the color component of the signal. So like you will see red striations with black stripes, and we will automatically detect it and filter that noise away. And you can turn it off if you choose to, or leave it on. Okay, so we've talked about second output before, as I showed earlier. When second output is turned on, then both the iscan will be in mirror mode and essentially default to the lowest resolution. So moving on, let's talk about test patterns. So test pattern is one of the really neat features about the iscan Duo. So in this case, this test pattern, I'll just get it out of the menu. There are shortcut buttons on the iscan Duo that allows you to quickly move from one test pattern to the next, and we can essentially label that as well. So this test, there'll be a label for you to see what kind of test pattern it is. I'm just using the forward arrow and the reverse arrow here. So test pattern on and off button to enable and disable test patterns, and then you have the checkerboard pattern left and right. So in the checkerboard pattern, every other pixel is turned on. So when the TV is actually scaling, then we will not be able to see a one-to-one pixel. That's why we put up the one black, one white pixel next to each other. So in this case, if you look closely here, every other pixel is being enabled. So another similar one to make it easy is that you can see here in this case that it's vertical line. So there's an every other line that's been enabled on the panel, and then you have every other horizontal line that's enabled. So when you see every other line being enabled in this case, or every other line in this case, then you know that the TV is running at its native resolution. So and if you see any other patterns that's not in this, that's not every other line, then you know some scaling is being done, or what we call moraying. So at this point, I want to actually move back to another test pattern because it shows a really neat feature of the Duo. So this pattern is called frame and geometry, where we're basically trying to show you every other, show you that when the iscan Duo outputs a certain resolution, like let's say 1080p, 1920 by 1080, that you are actually seeing every single pixel that is being sent out by the iscan Duo. So if the TV was showing every single pixel, then you should be able to see a white line at the boundary of this image. But in this case, as you can see here, the white line is missing. So the panel is actually, the TV is actually covering up, you're losing some pixels. It's covered up by the TV itself. So you're losing some pixels on the top, bottom, right, and left. So let's see if we can get the pixels back. And this actually happens in some TVs where, one example is you're watching a CNN or watching a business news channel, and somehow you lose your ticker tape symbol. The bottom is being cut off, and it's really annoying for some people. So you can actually, and there's nothing you can do on the input side because the problem is not the input. The problem is actually with the TV that's actually overscanning the image, and you don't have the control of the TV to do that because the TV doesn't have that mode. So what you do is that you would basically use a feature in the iscan Duo that's called underscan to recover that image. So let's go to the output setup because we're controlling the output of the Duo to the TV. And we go to something called underscan. And then you can basically bring the image in. As you can see right now, I'm underscanning by a bit, and voila, if you will, let me just close this, all your pixels are back. Because essentially what the iscan Duo has done is that it's basically bringing in the pixels that the TV is covering for you. Now you can see the white line at the bottom, and your picture will look perfect on the screen. So that's a really nice feature of underscan. And I'm just going to leave the picture in underscan here. And moving on to the next test pattern. So brightness and contrast allows you to set your black level and white level correctly on the television. So in this case, the iscan Duo's processing is not being activated at all. The iscan Duo is generating reference level signal for you to adjust your television. So this part is all about adjusting your TV. So we've talked about checkerboard pattern. Judder is a test pattern that is used to match the frequency, native frequency that your TV or panel expects to the TV that the iscan Duo is sending out. So if the bar is moving very smoothly, that means the frame rate from the iscan Duo is matching the native frame rate of the TV. This is important because now you can ensure yourself that the picture is going to be very smooth. The next pattern is the color bar pattern with 75 IRE. This is your SMPTE color bar pattern, and you can use this to again set up your TV. Just run this through real quick. 100 IRE. Gray RAM allows you also, these are all the test patterns that iscan Duo will generate that you are using to set up your TV. So there's a line. Crosshatch, these patterns were really useful before for essentially focusing a beam on your CRT TV, less useful now. And this is a half black and white signal, which we really like, because what this means is that, so you have now adjusted your television so it's the right level of white and black that you like. But now what happens is you want to make sure that when your source is connected to the iscan Duo, that its level is also correct. So the way to do this is that you would put in a test pattern into, say, your Blu-ray player. You buy a reference disc that has a half black and white setting, and now you would adjust the picture control of the iscan Duo so that you can adjust the input that's coming to the iscan Duo to match the output of the iscan Duo. So now you have a perfect signal that's going out. So this is what these half patterns are for. So similarly, you can adjust color, 75, 100, IRE, 8 bars, 7 bars or 8 bars. And now we have a 0 IRE, which is all black. It's very useful for calibration. 10 IRE, 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 100. And then red, blue at 75 IRE, cyan, magenta, and yellow. White and black at 75 IRE, and back to frame and geometry. So that's a lot of test patterns. But now we're moving on to the next item on the output setting. Output setup, I mean. So the output setup, we're done with test pattern. So now video format. So the iscan Duo automatically talks to the display and figures out what its native resolution is. And in this case, by just a single push of an info screen button, and moving on to the output status, we know there's an LG TV and it's 1080p 60 Hz and it's in auto mode, meaning that we are actually automatically setting the output of the iscan Duo. Now, some TVs have, especially a lot of legacy TVs, have the wrong native resolution setting, meaning that it's telling the Duo that it likes a certain frequency, a certain resolution, but that's not the native resolution of the TV. In that case, you can basically go to the iscan Duo and set the video format to many different formats and manually force it to a different format. So let's say in this case you can set it to 480p, 720p. I'm not going to, and once you set it, you can press OK and set it up. But in this tutorial, I'm not going to change the resolution, just to keep things moving faster. Underscan, we've already shown how neat it is to have an underscan. So let's talk about frame rate of the iscan Duo. So as we saw earlier, the iscan Duo is sending out 1080p 60. So typically, by default, the iscan Duo always outputs 1080p 60. Now, one-to-one frame rate here basically means that, and the default is disabled. When you enable one-to-one frame rate, the iscan Duo's output is now going to be dependent on its input frame rate. So 1080p 60 comes in, 1080p 60 comes out. 1080p 24 comes in, 1080p 24 comes out. And that's because in some cases, on certain TVs, the experience is better with a 1080p 24 signal. So by default, we keep it off. Now, we have a mode, still under output frame rate, we have a mode that's called frame lock mode. By default, it's in auto mode. Auto means just an auto lock. So say 60 Hertz comes in, the iscan duo actually locks to the signal, which results in a very smooth picture. If 50 Hertz comes in, now let's say what happens if a 1080p 24 comes in. If a 1080p 24 comes in, the output of the iscan duo is still going to be 1080p 60, but there will be a short amount of time where the iscan duo is trying to figure out what the input is, in which case you will lose sync. Now, once iscan duo locks to 24 Hertz signal, it still outputs 1080p 60 because the ratio with 1080p 60 to 1080p 24 is 5 to 2. So you still get a really nice processing conversion from 24 Hertz to 60 Hertz. But you're still locked to 60 Hertz. Now, what happens if 1080p 50 comes in? Let's say a 50 Hertz signal. In that case, the iscan duo can't quite lock to this, can't quite stay at 50 Hertz, 60 Hertz, and stay locked to 50 because the ratio of the frame rates are just it's not easily divisible. So what the iscan duo will do, it will basically unlock and stay at 60 Hertz, and now it will just convert as necessary to 60 Hertz from 50 Hertz. Now, the question is, since the iscan duo in frame lock mode will always output 1080p 60, then the question of course is, well, what does this unlock mean? Well, unlock just means that the iscan duo output 1080p 60, and no matter what happens to the signal, input signal, it will never lose the 1080p 60 timing. This is important because in some projectors, when it has to resync, or some TVs, there's a lot of noise and it takes a while for the TV to sync. So we don't want to lose sync on the TV or projector. So in this case, the TV or projector will always stay locked and get a nice experience. Of course, the disadvantage of being unlocked is that when you're not locked to the input signal, there could be cases where the iscan duo will have to add a frame or drop a frame, which in certain scenes will create a stutter. But you know, it will happen fast. As we saw earlier, I talked about aspect ratio on the aspect ratio at that time. We talked about was focused on only the inputs, right? And as I mentioned earlier, the iscan duo has memories that stores aspect ratio for each input. Now we talk about the output of the iscan duo. The output of the iscan duo now also has aspect ratio because when it's connected to the TV will tell the iscan duo what its aspect ratio is. In this case, it's 16:9. There'll be some televisions, legacy TVs, where it's 4:3. So automatically, through HDMI, you will know what the aspect ratio is. But again, to accommodate cases where auto does not work, we always have a manual override. Now, for color space, colorimetry, and video level, it's very similar to what we talked about earlier on the input side. Now the iscan duo is talking to the display, it's getting the information from the display, and it's automatically setting the color space, in this case auto. Colorimetry, auto, video level, auto. So the TV is telling us what it wants, what signal type it wants. But again, in all these cases, we have manual overrides for all these these controls. Chromaticity is the same thing. There's an auto as well as a different chromaticity, just like the input. So it's mirroring the input controls. A deep color is turned off in this case because we are not allowing deep color in this case because the TV is telling us that it's not a deep color TV. So we do not have it's grayed out. So if the TV is a deep color TV, then we will enable the deep color controls as well. So CMS is one of the key features of the iscan duo. There's many controls to allow the iscan duo to be calibrated with the CMS system using software from SpectraCal or ChromaPure. So here, profile select, you can have a CMS for day, CMS for night, color gamut settings. You can have color gamut settings here. I'll just quickly go through them just because CMS control which will be addressed in another chapter. And we can also bypass the CMS system, in which case, when we bypass the CMS system, we are essentially, the iscan duo processing is just literally bypass the color processing. And in some cases, that the user may want to do that. So And this is another convenience control. HDCP is automatic. We read from the TV, the HDCP device, and we do the right thing. So here it says, the nice thing about the iscan Duo is on-screen display is that you have hints to tell you what the menu is doing, and you can just experiment what it's doing. So here it says that apply the output content protection only if the input signal is protected. So that's probably the best thing. So if we get an HDCP, a signal that's non-HDCP coming in, we will output non-HDCP. That's great, because then you don't have the lag with HDCP authentication. Now, of course, you can also do the non-auto mode, where you always turn on HDCP or always turn off HDCP. Now, a caveat here is that if you turn off HDCP, that means that it's only useful if the signal is unprotected. Because if HDCP comes in and you turn off HDCP, because of the HDCP compliance, we will not be able to send a picture. We'll basically be we won't send out a picture. Border level we addressed earlier on how you can control the levels of your border, and that essentially, and mask level is when I showed earlier that we do an underscan on the output. Then the black level, once you underscan a lot, you get black levels on the output controls when you do underscan. Mask level will basically adjust the level of the output. Audio output is a convenience feature. Here we automatically select the audio output. In this case, there's an auto select. Auto select is really neat because it provides an easy way to switch between audio. Either the audio is output on the video HDMI, it's output on the audio HDMI. The iscan Duo has a third HDMI connector that is dedicated for an AV receiver. So, and then finally, of course, you can send it on optical and coax. So, what about auto select? Auto select, let me rephrase. So the key point here is that the iscan Duo never outputs all the audio at the same time. So what it does is it outputs audio only on one of these channels. So by default, auto select will always try to output audio to the AV receiver. Because audio HDMI connector here is HDMI, we know when the AV receiver is on. So we will automatically in auto select prioritize and turning the AV receiver and outputting audio on the audio HDMI. Now when you turn off your AV receiver, then in auto select mode we send audio on the video HDMI, i.e. going to your TV. So this is really nice because you can basically route your audio automatically just by turning on and off the AV receiver, which is what I use at home. Of course, for legacy AV receivers that don't have HDMI, you use optical and coax. Now, so the priority again is audio HDMI first, video second, optical and coax third. Again, if you don't do auto select, you can manually choose which one you want to select. As you can see, the user interface for the iscan is always based on auto with manual overrides. And that's the end of the output menu, configuration. So I had already mentioned earlier that we had essentially how we can set the priority of the input select. And we can also rename our input. So in this case, let's just go here. I'm going to just simply just add a few words so that we know we can do that. And then I'll just finish the selection really quickly. And now when we exit the menu, when we go back to input select, you will see that I've selected one DVD. So now that's how you rename. So perhaps you want to rename this to be Blu-ray, satellite, and whatnot. So under configuration, we have a lot of configuration for our users. You have auto wake up off, which is obvious, which means you never wake up. So in mode 1, the Duo system powers on automatically only if it goes to sleep automatically. And there's another case which is mode 2, which is the Duo system will always power on when it gets an input signal automatically. So here you have lots of controls for how to turn on how the Duo turns on. On standby, you can have auto standby, where when there's no input signal, the Duo will go into standby mode. And in this case, when it's off, you have to manually turn off the Duo. So for legacy analog signals, the Duo actually offers for legacy as well as for analog signal in 50 Hertz countries. We basically have a RGBS input. Basically what happens is that in Europe, when you have a SCART signal, the SCART signal actually sends RGB, and the composite signal is used as a sync. So in which case you can allow the component, one of the component inputs with a sync signal to support SCART in European countries. So by default it's disabled, in which case we treat it as a pure component signal, or we can enable it to basically accept an RGBS signal. So, and we can do this for both component inputs. So if you need to support RGBS, i.e. with SCART, then you can have up to two SCART signals. Now, one note is that the sync signal that is used for SCART is actually the composite signal. So if you have two RGBS signals being used for component 1 and 2, then you basically have one more dedicated composite signal. So menu timer is really a convenience feature. Early on in my talk, you saw that eventually the menu will time out, but we have now set the menu timeout to be just off. So for classes, for certain cases where you want the menu to always stay up until you tell it to go away, this will be a nice feature to have. LED brightness, I think it's obvious. You can just control the brightness of the LED on the Duo. Factory defaults allows you to default. We have 3 types of factory defaults. Again, on the input names, you can just default the input names, default the picture controls, or just default everything, and the video outputs. Updating firmware allows you to update firmware. Serial port allows you to set the serial port baud rate on the serial port control of the iscan Duo. And that is basically the end of configuration. So information is really convenient. The iscan Duo has pretty much everything you want to know about input status here. The HDMI input is 720p. The default color space is voice VCR. Sync type is obvious. And also, what is also nice, as I mentioned, is the audio source HDMI, and you can actually, it will actually tell you it's actually getting Dolby Digital or also True HD or high def audio. And lastly, let me just we have a single button for info screen, which is very handy to show you all the controls that we've set. And that's in a nutshell a fairly long overview of what you can do with the iscan Duo. I hope this convinces our customers that the iscan Duo is the very, very flexible video device for the video file or the discerning video consumer. Thank you.